Hey guys, welcome to the Tech Trapper Podcast, episode number 4, with your host, Aaron Reed. Today's topic of discussion: for the ones who write, a deep dive into the world of Supernote and organization. Today's special guest, Ed Finn of Organizing for Change. Let's do this, y'all.
Welcome everybody back to the Tech Trapper podcast with your host Aaron Reed. And today I have a very special guest. He is my Supernote expert, someone I like to antagonize about the Go 10.3 being better than the Manta. But he's an all-around good guy, real smart guy. Love his content, loves what he does with his page. We have Ed with Organizing for Change.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Thanks for inviting me, and I really appreciate this. I actually really enjoy our back and forths about the differences between the Manta and the Go 10.3. Kind of like you, I think you're the expert when it comes to that device. You really do a lot with it, and I learn something every time I watch a piece of your content. So for me, I I I love all of these devices in theory, but I'm one of those people that's very intentional about what I use, and I look for the device that fits me. And that's kind of where I ended up with the Supernote. After a lot of watching videos, a lot of research into what I actually needed, and yeah, I like the back and forth. I think that in another world, if the Supernote didn't exist, the Go 10.3 might be my device. I don't know. We'd have to see now that the Note Max is out. But thanks again for the invitation. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Oh no, no doubt, and I'm very excited that you had the time to sit down and talk with us today. I think it's going to be a very good talk, good interview because there are some things that I want to talk to you about, especially about the Supernote platform. As someone who uses the Books platform, I love the Go 10.3. However, I've sat with the Manta and the Nomad for about month and a half, 2 months, and they are both good devices to the point where I've always said when I bought the 10.3, it was simply because Supernote didn't have a 10-inch or larger device available at the time that I knew about. It was only the Nomad on the website. And if the Manta would have been out when I was when I was moving from the Scribe, I probably would have bought that one first. So I'm definitely want to hear your thoughts about where e-ink is and the platform that you use and why you use it. But let's just start. Let's uh let's kind of tell everybody a little introduction of who you are, where your platform is, and kind of what that content is that you cover.
Yeah, so as Aaron mentioned, I'm Ed Finn. I have Organizing for Change, which started on YouTube as a little hobby, to be honest. About oh, what would that be? About a year and a half now ago, and I started by actually my first video was on the Rocketbook of all things, even though I already had the Supernote, but I thought, well, this is an interesting tool. I had just bought it for my kids and for the Rocketbook for them to use with school and math and some of the things they were doing. And I thought, well, let's give this a whirl. I'd been watching Kit Betts Masters and Voya for a while, and I thought, well, maybe I can add something to the space. It was never meant to really be about the technology. It was more meant to be about organization and how you get and keep yourself organized. And we've kind of grown since then. I'm approaching 3,000 subscribers on YouTube. I've got a website now, which is created, and I know we'll get to this later, but it's created in Obsidian. I also have a podcast now, thanks to this man that's on the other side of the screen here and helping me figure out Spotify and how to get all that started. And so, yeah, do a lot of different things. My day job is actually in the Center for Teaching and Learning, running that at a university. So this is really something that I enjoy doing, and I bring a lot of that background and knowledge from all of the things I've done in the past to what I talk about on my channel, even though I don't directly all the time make those mesh. I try to keep some of that separate, but for the most part, it all intertwines. I think us being whole human beings, that just happens naturally, that our work lives, our personal lives, and everything else we do kind of blends together at some point.
Cool, cool, Ed. Yeah, that's cool. I ran into your channel and Rod's channel before I even ran into Kit and Voya's channel. And both those guys have a lot of content on E-ink and are very informative. Um, how long have they actually been doing content? Because it seems like it's especially Voya. I look at some of Voya's videos and it looks like he was like 5 years younger. And then, Kit just looks the same with his flowing hair. It's like awesome. Like, I don't know.
Well, I know Kit, and he mentioned this on a recent live stream we did, and he also just recently he's been doing it for 10 years in total, because Kit started by doing content on physics for his students on YouTube. So it wasn't really, I think, something he intended, kind of like me, quite frankly. I mean, of course, now he's over 50,000 subscribers, but uh, it wasn't something he intended to be a thing that he did as part of his daily work. It was mostly a thing that he used to help his students learn. Voya, I don't know exactly how long. I know I found both of them during COVID. Actually, I had seen someone who was working with us at the library using a Remarkable 2, and that's the first device I ever actually wrote on. And I thought it was genius, and so I went and started looking at videos, and that's where I found Kit, that's where I found Voya, and I just dove in and started trying to learn as much as I could. But yeah, they've been doing it a long time, and it's amazing how much content they actually have.
Yeah, no, they have a lot of content. I'm glad you brought that up. So that'll roll us into our first question, which was what kind of kicked off your love? I had tech or e-ink, but we'll keep it on e-ink. So what kind of kicked off your love or interest in e-ink?
Excuse me. Yeah, well, to be honest, this kind of intertwines because I saw you put tech or e-ink, but e-ink was something I wanted to do a long time ago, but it was something I never really saw as something I could incorporate into my workflow. I tried when I was a grad student I purchased a Nook. I had a first generation Kindle, and they were great for reading, but I really wanted to try because I was an adult going back to grad school, trying to work full time with a family. As a matter of fact, finishing my bachelor's and then going on to the grad school. And they weren't good for much else. You could read on them, you could technically, add comments into them, but they were very hard with that virtual keyboard. It just wasn't good for that type of work. And they definitely weren't going to work with what I did, which at the time was retail management and banking management. I couldn't take notes on them. I couldn't really do anything that I wanted ink in my mind to do. And I know there were probably things out there like the DPT-1 and some other things that I've since found about that I could have used for note taking, but I wasn't aware. I didn't know. Fast forward, and I had completed both my master's and my doctorate, and I was in uh, operations management. First, I worked for a consortium of colleges, and then I went on to work in a library, municipal library, and COVID hit. And we were basically having to update the entire infrastructure of this building that was 100 years old. And so we were having to move to the cloud. We were having to take things from tape backup and I don't want to get way into the details on that, but I was managing so many things all at once. And I had notebooks everywhere and post-its everywhere. And Raul was downstairs helping us migrate a server over, and he had his Remarkable. And I'm like, what in the world is that? And he had me write on it. And I fell in love. And I was like, okay, what is this thing? And that led me to thinking, could I truly now, because there was a 50, a good 10 to 15 year gap here between when I first wanted to do it to now, could I replace my paper? And the answer was yes. I looked, I found the best device to me, which was the Supernote. I bought it and I haven't looked back. I have not used a notebook except out of necessity, uh, if I didn't have my Supernote with me since, well, for the last 4 years. So
Yeah,
that's a lot of difference.
yeah. I haven't used in the last year. I haven't used a notebook. The only time I even write on paper is if I'm at work and I have no other choice. But even at work, I get my documents and move them to the 10.3 or the Mobi Scribe, depending on what I'm doing. But these things are awesome. And so and kind of like you, I tried to start with the iPad and the original iPad pen at first, because before that, um my wife would always use the Kindle app, but she would use it on the Fire tablet that we had bought, or she would look at it on the iPad. And my first experience trying to write on the iPad, I hated it. And I saw somebody with a remarkable tool, one of my colleagues in the automotive industry, and I just looked at it and was like, no, that sucks. Solely off of my iPad experience. And once I revisited it, a year ago, and I gave the Kindle Scribe a try. It was pretty cool. I like it. And I haven't picked up a notebook since. Or a journal. I used to go to Office Max and buy those like yearly journals that I always would run out of pages. So I would do that. Um, so my next question is going to be just e-ink as a tool. So what's your primary use case for e-ink, and what does that look like in your daily, routine, or how do you use it for work and both personal things like that?
Yeah, and that's a great question because I think use case in and of itself is such an important thing. And the reason that these e-ink tablets are so good at helping you think through problems or think through challenges that you've got. I use it for everything. So I use it for work. Prior to this, it was in operations management, but now I still am kind of in operations. I dabble in it. I'm in the Center for Teaching and Learning, so I work with faculty on course design and development. I work with new technology implementation. I'm constantly assessing technologies, vendor consultations about what the campus needs. All of that goes into my Supernote. Every conversation I have is recorded there. And so the idea being that, and I'm a little different in the way that some people use one master note, and there's no right or wrong way to do this, but I do meeting notes as in discrete notes. So I look at my day, what meetings do I have coming up? And then that morning, I create a different note for all of those meetings. And I use the header then to, if I ever want to combine those later on and have an archive, I then have hyperlinked headers all the way through. So it's kind of a different way of doing it. But when we get to Obsidian later, it kind of makes sense the way that my mind works. And but so I my workflow, I start that morning. I look at what my Google Calendar has to offer, which the Supernote actually syncs with your Google Calendar or Outlook. So I can see my calendar. I create all my notes that day because Supernote ties them to date created instead of date last accessed. And they're just blank shells. So I create them all that morning and then I go throughout my day and I can access them all right there from the calendar. So I just pop up, I go into the note I need, I take my notes, I close it, and I go back to that screen. But I also create, yeah, go ahead.
No, so pretty much, like, let's say on a Monday, you have six
Mhm.
different meetings. You'll go in and you'll create like a header for each different meeting, and then later on you can sync them all or link them all together.
Well, so I'll create a note for each meeting, and then the header, I go ahead and make the title of the note within the title. I title it the same thing that I name it in the folder because I'm kind of a weird person. I have this really in-depth folder structure that sets everything, but then I also have naming conventions within those folders so it's easy to find things. And so for me, And a good example of this is when I left the library, I archived everything. So I combined all of my notes into these huge master notes that, if you've circled those headers and you combine those headers are going to transfer into that new big master note. So now I've got this whole table of contents on the left by date for 2 full years worth of work that I can just easily navigate through. And it's pretty cool the way that the device can be customized based on how you want to use it. Now, for some people, that would be frustrating. They'd be like, okay, I don't want to create 6 new notes. I don't want to do that. You don't have to. You could have one master note and call it whatever you want. But for me, it works really well because if I don't want to combine it, or if one meeting ends up not being something that I need to keep, so maybe it's a vendor meeting and I'm not going to move forward with that vendor, and all I need to know is that I met with them, I don't really need to know a lot about the content, then I don't need to keep that note. So to me, it allows me to be pretty flexible. Um, and then when it comes to the YouTube channel, it's the same kind of process. I do a lot of free writing. I keep a pretty good hierarchy, and I, do my blog, every article, every Random Thoughts newsletter on Patreon. All of that starts on the Supernote, with very few exceptions. Occasionally, I'll just sit down and type because I've got time and I just want to do it that way, especially if I'm pulling in a lot of external links. I might do it that way so that I can keep it front of mind. But for the most part, no, I use the Supernote to start every draft.
Cool, cool. Yeah, man. That Supernote seems like it's a pretty good and powerful tablet, and I think we'll get into that now. So the next question would be, and I titled it for the ones that write. So the first question would be Supernote versus the Fill. What sets Supernote apart from the other e-ink platforms?
Yeah, I think both Supernote and Remarkable, quite frankly, are what I call intentional devices. So if you don't buy a Supernote if you want Google Play, you just don't. It's not going to do that. It's not designed to do that. It's not meant to do that. It's a very highly curated yet flexible platform to be able to do a lot of different things around writing and organization. Remarkable is a little too simplistic in my view, but if you all you want to do is have a notebook replacement and nothing else, I think it's fabulous. I think it does some great things. I think the Scribe kind of fits into that category too. If you're in the Kindle ecosystem, if you're in the Amazon ecosystem, the Scribe to me is genius. If I lived in that ecosystem, I would love that device, because some of the implementations around how you can take notes in a text now is really good. What's nice about the Supernote is it gives you that customizability, but without getting too cluttered. So, Books, I think, gets a lot of credit, and I joke with you a lot about Books, but they get a lot of credit from me in the idea of innovation. Am I freezing on your side, Aaron?
It was a little bit, but it stopped just a little bit.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So, to me, Books is one of those platforms that has a lot of uh, innovative things. And I think if you're looking for something that's as close as you can get to a laptop replacement in today's times, or as close to an iPad experience, now don't get me wrong, it's neither of those things, but as close as you can get on e-ink, Books is your platform. But back to why Supernote's different is because they're not trying to be either of those things. They're trying to be a high quality notebook that, quite frankly, does all of that already perfectly, but then keeps adding functionalities very intentionally around that experience. Like the idea of being able to bring your calendar in, the idea of being able to sync your email. I don't write a lot of emails from the Supernote. I do occasionally just to mess with somebody because it's kind of fun, but I can see them. So if I'm in a meeting and I want to just have my laptop in my bag in case I need it, I can do that and have the Supernote to both be able to look at my calendar and to look at my emails at a glance, knowing that I might not respond then, but at least I can see it. And I think those, that along with linking and along with, titling and some of the different functions that it allows, just make it a really good all around tablet where you're not fighting some of the complicated features that you might see on a Books or a Big Me or, and you have shown that the Books, and so is Voya, but you really show like that first person use case of how books can be optimized. The problem is for the newbie, that would be really hard to try and figure out that first time. And I think that that's where the Supernote kind of shines because the things that are easy to do are very straightforward and intuitive, and the things that it's designed to do. And then you can go crazy later on once you dig into the software and really, kind of want to maximize it to your own workflow.
Yeah, I definitely can see that. Like, example with the books platform last night, I've been using a Bluetooth keyboard with it to do some word processing, and having that virtual keyboard pop up, it wasn't bothering me until I got in a split screen mode where I was taking some things that I wrote and wanted to clean it up and text it and write it out or type it out. And I had to dig in the menus to actually figure out, okay, I can have the virtual keyboard disappear. I can actually have the handwriting to text keyboard stay, but it's not straightforward where you can see it. You got to kind of dig into the menus, and that's the one of the only things that I wish books would kind of change is make the software more accessible for those who, sometimes you don't feel like taking 5 minutes to dig into some tools and set something up. And a lot of stuff is hitting hidden on the books platform. Um, but yeah, no, Supernote seems like a very good platform that I probably would love to use because I don't really use a lot of third party apps. Like the calendar thing you were talking about, it sounds great to me because right now I have to have the Google Calendars app on the 10.3. And like for email, I have to have the email server on there for me to be able to check it. And I don't like using the Google app calendar. It sucks on Gmail. Yeah. Um, so the next question is going to be what are some of your go-to tools or features on the Supernote platform?
Yeah, for me, I think that there are two conversations here. Globally, the calendar is number one for me. Now, the problem with the calendar, and I don't want it to sound like it's all, all roses because it's not. You can only tie one calendar. So for someone like me who manages multiple calendars, that's a frustration. And I know Supernote is aware of it and they're trying to figure out a way to do that. But you can only bind one to the device. So I use it for my primary work calendar. That's where I bind that particular device. You also can't write on the daily view of the calendar. You can write on the weekly and you can write on the monthly. And for that, it's really cool. But the calendar interface itself is what's so brilliant to me because you've got your notes down in the left. You can start a new note directly from there. You have all of your Google tie ins on the right on the bottom, and those are both in the month and the weekly view. And then you have space where you can write more things. You can create new events. You can create events in the calendar from the note, which is really cool. So if you start a meeting with so and so on this date, you can circle that, say create an event. It'll take you to the calendar, and you can now create that event, which will sync with your Google Calendar. Pretty cool functionality to be able to do that kind of thing. Now, where it's interesting to me though is that um, when they're still working those bugs out as far as some of the other functions. But yeah, I mean, that's my go-to. Probably the thing I use the most is going to that calendar. But from the notes themselves, the linking feature, I think it does it better than anyone else. It's very similar to how Books does it. The difference is there's not as many steps. You just circle it. You say, I want this to be whatever you want it to be, a link, a to do, a calendar, whatever it is. And you make that happen right there. Keywords, all of that. You actually have me using keywords more now because I watched your video and I've got up to 10 keywords synced to a note now. So it doesn't limit you on that. And it's really useful because the idea of being able to tie keywords to a note instead of thinking of them as like static, like it has to be the word you circle, thinking instead of how many keywords relate to this note is pretty cool. So I've been using that a lot lately because the search functionality is just phenomenal on the Supernote, and you can search so many different ways. I don't tend to use the star marks. I know a lot of people do. Jeff Moss, a good friend of mine, uses the star marks all the time. I've started to use the to dos a little more, but I'm hoping they integrate those with Google Tasks. If they did do that, that would be a game changer. If there was some way for tasks, calendar, and to do and calendar on the Supernote to work together, I think that would just change. It would upend the way I work. It would make it so much more seamless. But one last point I want to make really quick about that is, and I also do a lot of annotating, but the cool thing about the Supernote is you don't have to link it to any outside calendar, and all of that functionality is still there. So for someone who's just paper based, who just keeps a paper calendar and wants to create things, all of that's internal to the device if you want it to be. So you don't have to bind your calendar and you can still create events. You can still create to-dos. You can still, do all of those things you would normally do, mark it up and write on the individual blocks. And I think that's kind of the beauty of it is that you can use it in that case of being connected or being completely disconnected and it doesn't change the functionality of the device.
Yeah, and that's how I use the Moby Scribe calendar, because I the Moby Scribe calendar, for me, the way you can write on the day, and you can create, future events or notebooks to tie to a day. It's better than the calendar app on the Books platform, which, from hearing you talk about Supernote and using it for a little while, if Books can kind of integrate some of that, like you said with Supernote, to be able to bring in my Google calendars and do that, or kind of do some stuff that MobiScribe has done, that would be a great calendar as well. Um, I just don't like the fact that on Books I can't create a notebook to tie to a future date. I have to wait to that date. I don't know why they do that. But hey, I got a question about Supernote. And it
Okay.
came up. It came up last night in the Discord. I think Functional Doc was talking about handwriting recognition. Which platform was better, either Woods or the Manta? And I've heard you bring it up before in the past, but I also heard you bring it up last night. And you talked about that the Manta does the. You have a handwriting. I wrote it down. You have handwriting recognition notes. So, what's the difference between a regular note? Like, for instance, in Books, I can write something and then I hit the AI button and then it do the handwriting recognition. It sounds like this does it in the background while you actually are working. So, could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah, and it's a great question. It's actually and it's across all Supernote devices. So even my A5X still does that. And it's when you go to start a note and it remembers your choices. So if you go to start a new note, you can change it from a standard note, which is a note with layers, and you lose layers if you go to a real-time recognition note. So there's one difference there. But other than that, all the functionality is still there. So if you choose real-time recognition, basically as you're writing your note, in the background, Supernote is recognizing your handwriting and it is trying to keep up with you all throughout while you're writing. So it's a pretty awesome feature, really. And you don't have to be connected to the internet for it. Once you connect your first time and download the package, after that, it just does it on device. So the idea is that OCR, that optical character recognition, is happening the entire time that you're writing. And if you see that it's really messed up, you can hit re recognize and it will try it again and look at it another time. Uh, and at any point, you can actually press the button to see where it's at, which is kind of cool. So you can be on a page and you can be like, oh, I wonder if it's getting everything right. You can press that button and see what it's recognized. Yeah, it's pretty neat. I mean, I don't know any other device that does it that way, at least that I'm aware of. And I could be wrong on that because my device is a Supernote. So I don't know all of these functions. But Vywoods and some of the other ones, it seems like you have to tell it intentionally. I want you to recognize this text. And with Vywoods, I think what they do is send it off to ChatGPT, which theoretically should be more accurate, but the trade-off there is you're sending it off to the cloud and you're waiting for that process to happen. And, it's also going off to a third-party provider. And some people just aren't comfortable with that. Uh, but yeah, it's an amazing process. It works really well for me. It saves a ton of time when I go to take those drafts and move them to Word or move them to Obsidian. And it also enables a function we'll get to later in Obsidian that happens only with those notes, which is kind of cool.
See, I'm not sure how Books actually does it because I don't use it that much. There is a OCR button within my notes, and I have noticed I don't have to be online because I don't join other networks. The only network that I have the 10.3 connected to is my home network. I don't connect it to like Starbucks or anywhere else. Um, but I notice when I'm flying on a plane or somewhere and I do the recognition, it happens so fast. I just assumed it was fast. I don't know if it's doing it in the background as I write, so I'm gonna check into that. But that is a very cool process, and I'm pretty sure you'll elaborate on it more when we get to the Obsidian portion. Um, so the last question here is going to be just Styli. What does Supernote have the best stylus on the market with the Heart of Metal line and the ceramic nib? What are your thoughts on that?
This is a hard one. So personally, absolutely. There's nothing better. I love it. As a matter of fact, I pulled this out just before this podcast because you mentioned it, but this is the original Heart of Metal pen. So this is the one's 4 years old now. It's the first one I got when I got my A5X, and I'm still in love with this pen. I love it. The writing feel combined with the Supernote, regardless of if it's Feel Right 1 or 2, they're both exceptional writing surfaces. And that ceramic nib, I don't think there's a better writing feel on the market. I just don't. Um, but again, that's all personal preference. I think that if you are, you know, into that ceramic nib. The problem with it is you can't take it to other devices. I know Rod tells us all the time it's perfectly safe. I just worry, and that's just the worrier in me, that I'm going to scratch a screen. And every device manufacturer has said, don't use this on our screens. Uh, but again, he's had no problems and he has lots of devices. So I'm not going to question his judgment. That's just my own personal confidence level, but I've tried it on the Moby Scribe, and the feeling with the Heart of Metal is just phenomenal. Now, you get some trade-offs there. It doesn't have an eraser, but I'm a big fan of the Supernote gestures, and I use them extensively, so I don't need one. And you don't get a button. Again, I don't run into a problem with that because I use the gestures that my device has, and I don't need it. I don't need either of those things. But when it comes to just build quality and absolute, um, beautiful too. I mean, if you look, this is the Samurai pen, and it's just gorgeous. It's weighty. It feels like a regular pen. The Lamy that you use is also an absolute awesome pen. Um, so I would argue that if you are looking for the best EMR pen and don't need a button and want to put some kind of cover at least on it that's going to protect your screen, it's the best around. But again, that's very subjective because if you aren't worried about that and you'd rather have a nib that's going to spin, then I think probably the Lamy is probably the best one on the market for that, you know. So One thing I would say about Styli is I want to love this pen so much, and I don't know if it's coming through right now, but this is the Twin, the Safari Twin, and I wanted to love this pen so much because it has a real pen for those times I find myself in need of a real pen, and it has the ceramic nib, but it rattles and it clicks whenever I go to write with it on my Supernote, and about 5 minutes in, I can't. And so I switch over to my harder metal, only because of that. I love the look of it. Yeah, it's plastic, but it looks good, it's light, it feels good. As a pen, it writes phenomenal. It just doesn't do well when you put it on the Supernote because you get that clicky sound, and that just bothers me.
Yeah, no, the Heart of Metal is a nice pen. I bought one. I think I bought one when the Mantis came out. I went to Supernote's website and I bought one. In the first couple of days writing with it, I didn't like it, but after a while, I liked writing with it. I I think you're correct. You probably should use it on that Supernote screen. If I had a Nomad, I definitely would only use a ceramic nib with that Heart of Metal pen on it because the writing feel on the Supernote is better than it is on a 10.3. But like you, I'm afraid I'm gonna scratch the screen. So I use it every now and then on a Mobi Scribe, probably because of the price point. If I scratch the screen, I don't care. But it it's a nice pen. It's a nice pen, and honestly, I don't really care about the button that much on the Lamy. I only use it on the Scribe because the Scribe gives you about 7 different functions for that button. I actually use the scribble erase a lot when I'm writing. I just scribble over what I want to go away. So let's get into Obsidian now. I know you use Obsidian a lot, and I've seen your website, and I think it's the coolest thing ever. So first off, let's talk about what is Obsidian.
Yeah, so Obsidian, and I'm going to go very high level here because I'm not the expert in the platform itself, but the best way I can describe it is it's a visual interface a for someone who's very much into Markdown. So Markdown is basic text files that you mark up with a language. And what Obsidian does is it takes those basic files and converts them into visual representations. So if you mark something as a header, it looks a specific way in Obsidian. If you mark something as bold, it'll transfer that over. So it makes it look like rich text. That's my very much 30,000-foot non-professional, as Jay would say, opinion of what Obsidian itself is. Now, what Obsidian offers, which is phenomenal, is the ability to then link all of those notes and all of those different documents or repositories or anything you have together into that visual representation. And the idea is that you can, and you store all of this locally. It's the other beautiful thing about the platform. This doesn't exist in the cloud. So it basically, you point it towards a folder, you tell it, this is my vault. It calls it a vault. And then it turns all of those components of that vault into things that can be connected. It's really a very cool platform to use. I was turned on to it by Nick Milo. I saw his linking your thinking videos, and I was like, "Wait a minute, what is this thing? It does things the way I think, which is a hot mess sometimes, but it's just how my brain works." And it's similar in some ways to what some people think of as a mind map, but a mind map is very high level categorization. Obsidian lets you make deep contact or deep connections inside specific notes to people, to other notes, to other, information all over your vault. So it's really a cool platform for that. And I think that again, I like it so much because it's a lot like to me the way I think the Supernote is. You can get the base Obsidian and just start writing, and it just kind of works. And you have to learn a little bit about what Markdown is, but it's not that hard. Markdown is a language; it's just knowing some characters, and you can just start. You can be as you can have as little complication and complexity as you want, and you can just start using this thing. And but if you go all in, and I definitely don't. I do a lot of things, but there are tons of community plugins because it's a free open source product, and you can go crazy with it if you really want to. But yeah, that's what it is, kind of in a nutshell, I guess is the best way I can describe it. And it's really kind of choose your own adventure on what you want to be able to do with it.
And when you say Markdown, so when I'm going in there, adding my links, and I'm using kind of like the shortcuts or that language, is that's what Markdown language is?
Yeah. So, for example, to create a link in Markdown, you would do a double bracket before and a double bracket after. And
Okay.
that creates and tells Obsidian that this is a link because it reads the Markdown file. And, again, it adds a lot of flexibility. So if you're pulling in something from the outside um, and you want to embed it, sometimes it'll automatically create those links for you because Obsidian does that. It recognizes this as a link and it'll help you pull that in. But overall, what it does is it interprets those markdown characters, those special characters, and it formats accordingly to that.
Okay, cool. So the next question is going to be, and you can kind of tie. We'll tie two questions in, I guess. The first one is just how you use Obsidian for your PKM or your personal knowledge management, and then with E-ink, using Obsidian with E-ink, how do you from there kind of roll that in there and use the Manta or the Nomad with Obsidian, and how you kind of use it as a tool?
Yeah. So again, personal knowledge management, not something I was extremely familiar with. I mean, I think we all natively use that. The way we structure our days and our lives are our own way of, kind of, you know, uh, managing our knowledge and trying to figure out how we should do things. But I didn't know it as a recognized term. And when I found Obsidian is when I found PKM. And all of a sudden, I'm like, wow, I can take this thing and almost treat it. And a lot of people hear second brain systems, and second brain systems to me are what PKM is. So I'm replicating the way I think and the way that I approach topics and meetings and notes and all these different things in a digital environment. And when I was younger, when I was a much younger man, that was a lot easier to do cognitively. So a lot of times I would have knowledge in my head of being on a campus and meeting people. And then I'd be on another campus and I'd be able to say, oh, well, these people at Lawrence University are doing this great work. Why don't you contact them and I'll send you their contact information. Well, now that's a little harder sometimes to be able to do that on an instant recall basis. So what I do is I use Obsidian for a lot of that. Within a note, as I'm writing and refining that note, I will go, oh, wait a minute, that sparks that this person over here is doing that. And I'll link their name to their contact, or I'll link a note. And the cool part about once you start a link is they become searchable. And so you can kind of find that note and then pull it in. And then now you've got a link directly to whatever you're talking about. Or it may be a PDF or a report or a website or pretty much anything. It becomes a living, breathing thing. Now, it's not like AI where it's trying to do that for you. You're still doing all of the heavy lifting and you're making all of the connections. It just makes it easier in the long run for you to identify what that looks like and what that is. Now, if you take that a step further, and this is unique to the Supernote. So I'm not saying other platforms couldn't do it. I just don't know how they would do it yet because there's a specific community plugin written for the Supernote that allows real-time recognition notes that we were talking about earlier. And let me back up a minute. You can bring in notes regardless. So The plugin just brings over a note file and it analyzes that. So if all you want to create is an archive for your handwritten notes in Obsidian, you can do that. You can just drag those into your vault. Obsidian will recognize it if you have the plugin. And when you click on that note file, you'll be able to see your handwritten notes. And from that, you can generate, if it's a real time recognition note, a markdown file. So it'll read all of that text and it'll give you that information. You can generate a PDF or an image. So that plugin is super, super powerful for what it does. And I find myself generating a markdown file, generating a PDF, and then pulling the PDF into the markdown file, and then putting the overall note back into kind of an attachments folder and just letting it be. And then I refine my notes in Obsidian and I do all of the linking that I want to link there. So if like, oh, well, these 5 people were at the meeting. Oh, well, I have a contact card for all 5 of these people. I'm going to make sure their names are listed so I can click and see where they are and what other groups they belong to, who else they know, how many meetings they've had with me, all of these really cool things that platform lets you do. And then I also have the handwritten note there for reference. So if I ever need to refer to it or if the recognition, so if you write something on this side in, a column, the handwriting recognition will just put that wherever it sees it. And sometimes you have to fix that within as you refine the notes. So it's not good at kind of recognizing a handwritten column. And I don't think any of them are really good at that, but it's hard to do. It's hard for it to say, "Oh, wait a minute, they're writing this side by side and there's a gap." So sometimes it'll shove it up or below some other text. So it's nice to have that visual representation there to be able to refer back to, or if the handwriting missed something, or if it's a graphic that you drew. So there's a lot of different things that it's really good at. But it enhances the Supernote platform in a way that I don't link as much in Supernote as I used to because I keep that in this platform because it's more efficient. You can still do it all in Supernote. You can link and do all of those things, but it's just so much easier and more efficient for me to do that in a platform that has so much more information.
So like I know when I use Obsidian on my Mac, it saves locally. And then when I use the Obsidian app on my 10.3, it saves locally there as well. How do you manage that? Because I know you use Obsidian Sync, but I think you use it for your website. So how do you just manage the information that's being saved locally on the computer or the Supernote?
So your Obsidian Vault, and the cool thing about this is that you're right, it's all local. So Obsidian is free, you don't have to pay anything to use it, but if you wanna use their sync service, which is I know there are a lot of workarounds and a lot of people, out there using Syncthing and their own servers, but I don't mind supporting someone who's giving me a phenomenal tool for free, and pay a little bit for their sync service because it really does work across any device. So the idea and the way it works is you save your vault locally, and I do it 2 ways. So I save it in OneDrive, and then I save my OneDrive Obsidian files locally. So it has to be local, but it's also backed up on OneDrive in the cloud. So that way I have kind of a redundancy built in. But you have to save the files locally or Obsidian has a lot of trouble doing anything with them. But once you save those locally, then all I do is pick a folder when I'm at work. So my Obsidian Vault comes with me and I save it there again as a local folder within OneDrive locally. And Sync, I don't know how it does it. It's magic, I swear, but it will update all of those things, including on my phone, seamlessly, and it keeps a history. So if you accidentally delete something, if some file gets moved, it will show you that log, and it just does a great job at managing all of that. And I've had very few issues with it at all, as far as the sync. I've heard some horror stories, especially if you try and do it just by OneNote. If you try and kind of cheat and just use OneNote, it'll duplicate and it'll cause all kinds of issues. Not if you do it this way. If you save it locally on every device and then you just let the sync process work, it's really amazing. And I mean, they're expert developers for a reason, and they've figured out how to make this thing happen, and it's end-to-end encrypted. So, and you can even set your own encryption key. I didn't do that, but if you wanted to, you could actually set your own encryption key so that Obsidian would have no way to actually ever see the data while they're moving it. Again, I know you could do that. You asked about the website though, and really quickly, there is a separate product they offer. And again, this is all in addition to the base Obsidian. So Publish is what they offer very reasonably. And all you have to do is get a domain. And once you have your domain, you can go in and use Publish and you tell it what files you want to make public. And then whatever files you want to make public, you can then add to a public facing website and it'll publish it. So it's pretty cool. It's really seamless because you're used to working in Obsidian already. Uh, you do your notes, you do your headers, you do your markdown, all of that stuff. And then what's really awesome about it is when you publish it, it creates a graph view for you, which is the Obsidian graph is one of the coolest things because it shows all of those interconnections. But it does that for your website. And you can turn that on or off if you don't want it. And it allows, again, your users to have a visual interface to go along and see where things are connected or linked within those public files. So I can link a blog to a video, or I can link a blog to another note, or I can link well, pretty much anything on the web page, to something else, and as long as it's in that public folder that I've included in the publish version, it'll show that, and it's clickable, and people can go to it, so it's pretty cool, and you can still add externals as well.
That's cool. So with Obsidian Sync, I can have, my iPad, my Mac, my 10.3 and my phone, and I can have my Obsidian votes stored locally on all of those devices. But once I use Obsidian Sync, it'll sync all of my information between those devices.
Mhm. Yeah, it will, and the only caution I would give, and maybe it's better on the Go 10.3, this is where I think Books is better than Supernote when it comes to any third-party thing. Supernote and Obsidian, the actual app, I wouldn't recommend anybody using it as far as for, like, the graph view and stuff like that, because E-ink just it has so much trouble processing that much information. However, they do have a new E-ink beta theme that I think works across all these devices, and you can use the Supernote virtual keyboard to handwrite and use the markdown toolbar. They've got a really brilliant markdown toolbar, so you could theoretically use that. I think it would be faster on the Go 10.3 though. I think you just got more horsepower behind you on that, and it would probably be a better experience if you were wanting to use the app. I use the plugin because it's just better in my workflow, and that's something you won't get if you go into another ecosystem, at least yet.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's a lot of good information on Obsidian. I saw somebody who was on YouTube. I forgot his name. He was using Obsidian to build his website, but he was just using the base version of it, and he had like 10 steps he had to do, and I got confused after the first 3 minutes of the video, so I stopped watching it. But it just seemed confusing, and I'm like, this doesn't sound like the process Ed said he did when he used Obsidian for his website. So I see that you use the actual Obsidian Publish service that they have. So that sounds like a really good service. It's something I'm working on now, and I think I'm going to use Obsidian's Publish service with that because it is a great tool to use.
It is, and if you're not like, I mean, I'm old school enough to, yeah, I built a site on GeoCities back in the 90s, and so I know some basic HTML. I used front page and that kind of stuff, but there's no coding here with Obsidian. I mean, as long as you know the markdown language and what bolds, and quite frankly, just so everybody's not scared away, you can, at least on a PC, you're the Mac expert, but in Obsidian on a PC, you can highlight, right click, and get to a lot of those markdown features, creating bulleted lists, bolding, italics, all of that stuff by using a menu driven system. So, just so that folks are aware, you don't have to remember all of the markdown shortcuts. Like if I'm doing a bulleted list, I usually don't use markdown. I just highlight the text, right click, create bulleted list, and it does it for me. So just so that folks are aware of that, it's a pretty intuitive tool. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's there is a learning curve. It's not easy by any stretch, but it's not as hard as if you're also trying to use third party pieces to make all of that happen. If you go with what they've designed to work specifically with the software.
Cool, man. Cool. So I guess the last set of questions we'll have here, we're gonna talk about organizing for change. I like your YouTube channel and your Patreon and your content that you put out, and I want to expose your platform to some of our listeners and things like that. So the first question is, what is the mission statement for organizing for change?
I saw this question and I was like, I don't really know. And I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but it's to me, and this started as a hobby. I told you this at the beginning, and I'm very transparent about it because it doesn't really feel like work to me a lot of the times. And I don't really want it to because I have enough work, I have enough things going on. Uh, but I saw something and quite frankly, Kit and Voya, specifically Kit, who's both a mentor and a friend. And I saw what he was trying to do, and then I've gotten to know you and Jeffrey Moss and Rod. And when I first started this, it was in the basement, not the basement, but like the semi basement, the third floor of the house at the bottom, and it's like partially underground. And if you go back to that first video, it was awful. I mean, video production was awful, lighting was awful. But I thought to myself, you know what? I have, over 30 years of experience in operations management and, spanning retail, municipalities, academia, banking. And I'm a pretty organized person. And I thought maybe, just maybe, I had something that I could offer to folks and that maybe they'd like to hear it. I mean, that's kind of what this started as was this idea that, you know, I I know how chaotic life can be. At one point I was a single father trying to complete my first degree as a returning student at 30 years old. So that was my life. And then I was blessed to meet Melissa. We were both single parents at the time. We blended our families. And then I went on to get a master's and a doctorate while growing that family, working full time and trying to balance all of these things. So to me, as someone who comes from a background where I never seem to not be trying to organize the next thing and how chaotic that is, I thought maybe that could translate into helping somebody else who may be in the same circumstance, who may feel that they're overwhelmed, that they've just got too much going on. They don't know how to keep it together. They don't know how to keep it all organized and take one bite of that elephant at a time to get it done. And so for me, that's kind of the mission. I don't want it to become like this full-time job. I mean, I'm not saying I would if I became a full-time YouTuber, okay, that would be weird. And I think that's kind of why I respect Kit so much because that wasn't his original intention either. And now you see that he's gotten much more into that realm. But it's but I want to really add value. And I think that's the thing. I want to have a conversation. I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have met Rod. I wouldn't have met Jeff or Vlad or any of these people that I really enjoy having conversations with had I not started doing this thing that now Melissa probably thinks is a little crazy because it started in a basement during COVID, during the tail end of COVID.
No, that's cool, man. That's cool. Like I said, I love the channel. I've learned a lot from it. Going back, just seeing content on Supernote, content on organization, your reading list and things like that. So I really value the channel and the content, and you can get a lot from it just by viewing it. Um, so what I know a couple of the projects that you're working on, but what are some of the projects that you're working on with change with Organize for Change?
Yeah, so one, I actually owe you an apology because my library, has not grown substantially on the website in a while because I really appreciate your interest. I have a lot of books. When I was a kid growing up, we didn't have, books around. We would go to the library. It's why I love libraries so much. And so one thing I said as I got older is that I'm going to have books and my kids are going to have books. And so I have a lot of them and I've got quite a few online already. But eventually the goal is to keep working through the library that I do have, including audiobooks and different things, just to share kind of my love of books. So that's one project. It's not one of the it's not on the forefront because I've got other things going on, but it's kind of a labor of love. I really enjoy putting that out there. And if folks get any value out of that and seeing all of the crazy stuff I read, I think it's kind of cool. The biggest thing right now is the organization course that I launched earlier this year. And so a lot of the stuff we've talked about today with the Supernote, with Obsidian, but even more in depth than that, how do you get started with mind mapping? How do you get started with file structuring? How do you think through getting your head around the chaos that's life? Those are the types of things. It's a basic course that kind of runs you through that. And I tried to really make that economical. I didn't wanna be one of those people that said, "Take my $500 or $600 course." So I think it's reasonably priced, and, I'm working on module 3 right now, hoping to maybe get a couple extra out this summer while it's a little quieter at work, but trying to roll those out at a minimum on a monthly basis. It's a total of 9 modules, and it's a lot of fun. And then just keep adding content to the YouTube channel and writing my blog, and trying to make sure that I'm strategic on that, and not veer off too much into all the shiny new tech that's out there, but stay true to what I said the channel is, which is more about organization and being intentional about the things I do focus on. Um, but also trying to realize there's only a finite amount of time in a day for me to get everything done that I'm trying to do. So
So I know we've talked about this. I know it's come up, and I know you're not a reviewer. I would love it if you found maybe one or two other platforms to just do some reviews on. I think that will be great. Um, I think you should write a Supernote use case book, like an instructional book to show us how to use e-ink. I'm telling you, that'd be a great book to read for someone who's new to e-ink and is looking for a platform to get into, and would just wants to know what they can do. Because that's what I use your content for when it comes to Supernote, to figure out if this device is the right thing for me or not. So I feel like that would be a great thing for you to do.
well, thank you for that. And it's I'm not going to say no. It's possible because I'm doing a lot of research for this course and I'm putting together a lot of different materials for it for people to be able to practice on and do different things. So I would have a lot of information that I might be able to put into a book, but it's not on the top of my radar, but it's something that I'm interested in. And I did do a review on the Moby Scribe. Now, it wasn't an in-depth review because I'm not going to use it, But I recommended it because I think as an entry level at the price point it's at, it's very good. And I keep toying with whether or not I want to go into other platforms. Uh, the biggest thing there is that I want to make sure I do them justice if I do. The last thing I want to do is do some kind of superficial review on something that I'm not invested in and have that come through. Because if nothing else, all my flaws included and the bias that I definitely have towards Supernote as far as it's my device, at least I'm authentic about it, I think. And I try to tell people that I'm not saying these other things are bad. I'm just saying this is the best one for me, at least right now. Um, the Note Max, quite frankly, was the closest thing I had on the book side to just saying, "I'm gonna get the thing and try it out." But again, I'm not sure it would fit what I do, whereas a larger version of the Manta would. So it's weird. I hear that, and I just wanna be real careful, um, to not overpromise or to not get too far outside of offering what I hope is quality advice that people can take.
Yeah, no, because a lot of times I think for you to honestly do a review, you have to really sit with a device and use it for a while. I don't think you can like unbox it, use it for a day, and give an honest review of how to use it. That's why I don't know how Rod does it because he sits with this stuff and he uses it and he'll use four different tablets in one day. I can't do it. But yeah. So where can we find your where can listeners find your content, find you online and things like that?
Yeah, so on YouTube, I'm at Change Agent 1820. So you can find me there. The best place, if you want to find me anywhere, though, quite frankly, is the website. So on the website, it's ofc1820.com. So, and that's just basically organizing for change 1820, but it's ofc1820.com. And from there, you can find everything else. We're new on Spotify now, so you can find us there. Down in that bottom of every page, you'll see uh, at Change 1820 on Twitter or what X now, I guess, on X, on Blue Sky, on Instagram, Facebook, all of that. But I do most of my content, it starts on YouTube or the blog is on the website. And it's growing. So, feel free to check me out there. Patreon's also growing. I've got a decent following over there and, a lot of different things that I do. And I try to make sure that I put out enough content in each kind of area that people feel like they're getting value for what they see. But yeah, and if you have suggestions, my email's in the description of my YouTube channel, so you can always email me with suggestions as well.
Cool, Ed. Man, I want to thank you for sitting down with me today. This was a great conversation. I've learned more things about the Supernote platform, about organization and using Obsidian as well. Um, and I'm gonna keep supporting your channel. I love the shorts that you're doing, by the way. I call them my Ed's highlight reel with your shorts that you're doing. So it's some pretty cool stuff there. I enjoy seeing your interactions on Reddit. I still think you need to be the PR rep for Rata, to quiet down these people complaining on Reddit. But I enjoy the content, man. Enjoy the page. Looking forward to future conversations with you. And I'm looking forward to even more lives that you do. That last live you guys did with Rod and Jay and Kit was pretty cool, man. So hopefully we can get some more of that type of content with you as well.
Yeah, well, and thank you, Aaron. Thank you for having me on. It's always nice. I mean, this is the first real long conversation you and I have had, and I really enjoyed it. We talk a lot in the Discord. We talk a lot. We did that one on Rod's channel where we went back and forth and debated, which was a lot of fun. But I think this gave me an opportunity because I appreciate your content. I think for similar reasons to why you watch mine is you really go into the practical application of it. And I think actually you and I both did one on HR and how you use the two different devices that way. So it's kind of cool that we overlap in a lot of ways with the way we think about these things. And I appreciate this opportunity. I think this is a great podcast series you're doing. I'm so glad I didn't have to follow the misses. I'm glad there was someone in between, because I think that I would have, been very scared. That was such a great interview you did with your wife. So it was a great conversation.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, she's a wonderful woman, and we have these talks at home, and I'm like, hey, let's film this right quick, and she was like, okay. So it worked out, man. But Ed, again, thank you for your time, folks. This is Ed Finn with Organizing for Change, Supernote expert, Obsidian guru, and he is great with all things organization. So check out his content, you guys.